welcome to another segment of Keep the Beat with Pete. And as we indicated in some prior notes, if you've been following along with the recent post I had, we're going to cover using the snare drum and its origins, taking it through some of the basic hi-hat segments of history of jazz, over to the ride cymbal, and then back onto the drums. That's what we're going to try to cover. Short segment. I think it's a really important one, and then it gets you to start thinking about things in sort of a complete flow, loop. Not only historically, but the way you can think about playing. So let's get started right away. I was just doing a little street beats in the old New Orleans march rhythms, but let's remember, this whole drum set contraption starts most in New Orleans, as far as I can tell, mostly. And you had marching bands, and then you had all different musical influences, and African American and European and Creole, and all different blends of sounds coming together. And the early jazz pieces that we have recordings of would have the drummers playing a snare drum, and somebody else is marching down the street. As you recall. And you know, they might do so the snare drum is the centerpiece of the drum set. And actually, you know, you take people like Buddy Rich and a lot of the other great jazz drummers. I've seen it written a few places. Buddy Rich was like a snare drum artist who then used the rest of the set. So the bass drum, in the early days, as I said, a separate person played the bass drum, and then eventually human engineering and creativity, they figured out, hey, hey drummer, can you, while you're sitting down at this snare drum, or even, you know, if we had you a marching parade of some sort, can you have this bass drum thing, and we'll give you some kind of contraption to pound it. Now maybe in the early days, you know, one. And remember, I was clicking the hi-hat. That didn't exist really for the drummer to do all that at one time. Then eventually that happened. So anyway, snare drum, center of the kit. Listen to your old Dixieland drummers. It's a style of drumming. I'll say most people can't play it that well because they don't. It's not called, you know, they're not called upon to play it. But when you hear them playing it, you'll see how much the snare drum is featured. The rim shots. And they might have a wood block, you know. You know, the Saints. Okay, so then what happens? Well, moving through the 20s into the 30s, you know, dance band music becomes popular, and as with all kinds of dance, which is key, you want to keep the rhythms direct, heavily grooved, and flowing, repetitive too, so that the people can dance. Well, this little contraption, the hi-hat, then comes along, and that's really where a lot of the swing band, if you listen to Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman and a lot of swing bands, a lot of stuff was happening. And you go throughout the third. Yeah, they used the ride cymbal and the crash cymbal, but this was the big guy. Okay, and then some, of course, with the tom-toms in the 30s and 40s. You got, you know. Gene Krupa and the whole bit with the. And on and on. But the hi-hat was the big change in your pulse. So snare drum in the early days, we moved to hi-hat, a little orchestration and coloring with the toms, Cozy Cole, Gene Krupa, a lot of those drummers, Chick Webb and all these people started to really advance things. And then what happens? Well, mid to late 40s, bebop comes around. Kenny Clark, I don't want to say he was the only one, but from what I've read and heard, that he was one of the big innovators. Ride cymbals now, the quality of them, the clarity of them, and the recording techniques are allowing people to express the major pulse, the time, on the ride cymbal. In bebop, a lot of the bops on the 4 and so forth, but point being, here we are on the ride cymbal, and it stayed that way ever since. Then what happened is the ride cymbal patterns, instead of the basic, are changed. Now they're changing. And in fact, we have a whole group of videos on ride cymbal patterns, basics, and then the variations and so forth like that. And I'm going to try to put it in the link below this video so you can link back to that segment. And that segment's important because we're now going to say, okay, so we started on the snare drum, we moved to the hi-hat, did a little use of the tom-toms for orchestration. Now we wind up on this ride cymbal. And what I'm suggesting is that a lot of the drummers then started saying, hey, all these patterns I'm doing here, why don't I transfer them back to the drum set for my 4-bar fills and so forth. And that's one of the things I think that's, sometimes underrated, even when you see instructional books, or sometimes you'll get somebody that'll give you a clip and they'll say, hey, look at this Philly Joe Jones, really Elvin Jones, nice fill, 4-bar. And what you start realizing is, like, if you were doing this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, Well, no accident, folks. It's just making a full loop. And people naturally are fond of taking it up the tempo. So then what happens? Well, the music changes. So you're not going to be playing the same rhythmic patterns in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Well, the 60s, it really starts, going in a lot of different directions, a lot of expansion direction. Doesn't matter, because the cymbal patterns that you're going to use even in fusion are going to still be transferable. So to really sum it up, and this is pretty short but sweet segment, starting the history of the drum set in Dixieland jazz and other music of the area that developed is snare drum. And then eventually there's a pedal, you can hit that bass drum. Then the hi-hat comes along and you could start keeping the pulse here. So you went from to there, and then here. So all I'm suggesting is bringing it all back to the kit when needed. I mean, there are songs that, even in the rock world, they, using all the surfaces. And you'll see a lot of books that'll say, and a lot of drummers say, I think of the whole kit as an equal valued surface. Yes and no. The cymbals are still the ones that are in jazz, are still the key. Probably a lot of fusion. But there are variations, and of course, those same patterns, the way you think there, you can think here and start to train your ear. So how do you practice it? I would suggest, as the last closing note here, is practicing it without headphones on, in this case, as if you were playing the cymbal instead of playing the snare drum, but you're playing the snare drum. You might just have 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1. Any pattern. And different time signatures. And do it with your left hand as well. Even yourself out so that now a lot of your phrases become interchangeable. And there you have it, a quick jog through the history of what happened on the kit, bringing it all the way back to ways of practicing and thinking about all those ride cymbal patterns and those interactions in your comping back onto the kit, whether it's 4, 8-bar phrases, fills, whether it's transitions, setups. Now you're thinking, hey, it doesn't matter, really I am on this surface, but now I'm back on this surface, and I'm on these surfaces. Not to mention, of course, using the belt. So there you go. Snare drum, hi-hat, ride cymbal, back to the, and of course the Thompsons, back to the whole kit. Bass drum drop-ins as needed. 1 and 3 is nice, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then accents, syncopations, and all that stuff, as you know, in zillions of books and illustrations. This is just a way of thinking and practicing it. that enables you to now start creating and thinking like, wait a minute, I keep thinking in this box all the time, and now let me think this way out to that. Instead of from here to here, I want to go back that from here to there. From here to there, I don't want to go from here to there. Like you think of funk music in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and rock music. I mean, you're here a lot. And well, now it's reversing it, and thinking those reversals really does force you to look inside the room instead of outside the room, vice versa, okay? So I hope you enjoyed that segment. I think you can practice this and train your ears to hear it either way. And then it's going to start becoming second nature. And then when you play it, people are going to go, oh, I get it, but he's saying that backwards. Not really, but yes, you know. And that's the whole idea of creativity. Now it's like saying, wait a minute, if I could do this, why can't I do that? Okay, so new subscribers, welcome. Those who've been with me for a while, thanks for watching. And remember, we're working on ways to open your mind up to creativity, because you learn certain things and then you've got to now go create something in the studio or on the bandstand, like this week, next week, whatever. So create the beat you keep. Keep the beat with Pete. Peace out. Thanks for watching.